Some friends in the advertising world told me, well, when people start to say, we've heard that before and before, the ad is just beginning to work. So forgive me if there's a little bit of repetition here. Anyway, beyond all the social arithmetic in the dropping off the edge report, the document fundamentally relates to that part of the Australian belief system encompassed by the traditional idea of a fair go. Social values, like a fair go, which comfort the social conscience of Australians, are two-sided. The first takes the form of declaratory statements of principle, which we rather too often unquestioningly assign to social arrangements which in fact may not afford the measure of equal opportunity and even-handedness implied by the principle. The second side of the fair go principle, the one of prime importance to this project, is the extent to which it drives increased life opportunities for those markedly lacking in them. The perspective we've adopted on this issue is social geography, based on evidence of the influence of local social climates on people's life opportunities. The study utilises information about the distribution across Australia of 22 forms of disadvantage, which are called indicators, which previous research, extensive research, has shown to limit people's life opportunities. The indicators range across income, education, disabilities, training, unemployment, mental health, child maltreatment, crime and punishment, and housing stress. These are expressed in the study as rates of occurrence within local areas, postcodes, statistical local areas, local government areas, according to the availability of data. Overlaying the spatial distribution of the indicators allows us to bring into focus areas of concentrated disadvantage. Now, remembering, as Julia said, that this is the second of two similar national studies sponsored by Catholic Social Services Australia and Jesuit Social Services, with two additional smaller scale studies in 1999 and 2004, we didn't come to the present project empty-handed. For example, we knew that little more than 2% of Victoria's postcodes are needed to account for a quarter, or 25% of the state's prison admissions, and 25% of children on youth justice orders in Victoria come from just around 2.5% of postcodes. One of the sponsors' interests was in seeing whether a comparison of the 2007 and 2014 findings revealed locations that had undergone major changes, with the possibility thereafter of identifying factors that contributed to significant improvements. And that's an issue to which I will return. Well, we converted a mountain of data gathered with the assistance of social service and data generating agencies, including government departments, into a map of the distribution of social disadvantage throughout our country. Taking account of the makeup of the populations involved, the rate of occurrence of each indicator has been calculated for each of 2,120 local areas across Australia, with many a telephone call and letter attracting that data. These localities have been ranked in relation to the scores for the other areas within their state or territory. And this yields a picture of locations that tend to be repeatedly near the top, maybe around, say, the top 5% on the disadvantaged rankings, as well as the principal elements of the profiles of those areas. Some indicators we have found to be consistently to the fore. For example, the results for New South Wales and Victoria show a recurring pattern in highly disadvantaged areas. Criminal convictions, adult imprisonment, juvenile offending are at high rates in those multi-disadvantaged areas, which are also burdened by unemployment, disabilities, lack of qualifications, domestic violence, mental health problems, and low family income. Overall, the general picture is that cumulative disadvantage tends to be markedly geographically concentrated throughout Australia. In South Australia, unemployment, overall level of education, criminal convictions, and an indicator which we call young adults not in full-time work or education training, these were the prominent features, a pattern similar to that of Queensland, the Northern Territory, and with a small number of local government areas involved in Tasmania. The high-frequency indicators in Western Australia's disadvantaged areas placed more emphasis on standard test results, literacy and numeracy test results, internet access, unengaged young adults again, and psychiatric admissions, as well as prison admissions. Now, there is a bit of good news in all this, at least for the bean counters. In the light of the data we've employed, cumulative disadvantage tends to be highly geographically concentrated. Viewed from the perspective of the number of times each locality features in the top rank positions on those indicators, you find that in Queensland, the Northern Territory, South Australia, 6% of the statistical local areas account for half or more of all the top ranks. A similar pattern applies in New South Wales, Victoria and Western Australia. In Tasmania, the 5 most disadvantaged local government areas out of 29 accounted for 2/3 of the top ranking positions. Now, if I seem to be giving a little extra emphasis to Tasmania, it's because at a meeting staged by CSSA, I thought I was going to be thumped by somebody from Tasmania who reckoned we didn't say enough about Tasmania. So to avoid that, if the gentleman is here. Now, a second way of gauging the vulnerability of each location to relatively high scores on those indicators will be less familiar with most people. Statisticians have developed a way of compacting a range of scores down to a single figure that takes account of performances high and low on all of the indicators. And we've used this procedure across the 4 studies. Emphasised the priority, and on that basis emphasised the priority claims for special assistance of the 40 most disadvantaged localities in each jurisdiction. In particular, we've highlighted the 12 locations that comprise what we call in the report the first 2 bands of overall disadvantage. Now we're at a point where I can say something about the sponsor's initial inquiry about identifying locations that have undergone changes. Well, the message is a stark one. 4 waves of research over the 15 years already mentioned have served to confirm the enduring cumulative social disadvantage of a relatively small number of localities across Australia. Here's a couple of examples. Among the results for New South Wales is the finding that 15 years ago, 9 of the 12 names in the top 2 bands on disadvantage were the same as in the present listing. The corresponding result for Victoria is almost the same. In South Australia, 8 of the 12 most disadvantaged localities in 2007 were the same as for 2014. Well, to borrow a modern expression, but one that comes to mind when you've, with Margot and others, been working your way through all this material, to borrow a modern expression, it's time to get real about overcoming the restricted life opportunities available to people in highly disadvantaged places. Now, just how influential living within a web of interrelated disadvantages can be is shown by some of the findings of our research. I attach great importance to this part myself. The rate of prison admissions within the 3% most disadvantaged localities in South Australia is 10 times higher than the remainder of the state, and 8 times so in Queensland, and in New South Wales, 3.5 times higher. The rate of youths unengaged in full-time work or education or training in Queensland, and South Australia and Western Australia is approximately 4 times higher in that 3% group, and double in Tasmania. There's approximately a 5-fold difference with regard to the overall level of education in the 3% most disadvantaged places in South Australia, Western Australia and Queensland, and approximately a 3-fold difference in Victoria and New South Wales. Now, if somebody told me that the rate of any of those things was double, I'd find that alarming. But when you start seeing ratios of that magnitude, it becomes more than just a statistical exercise. It becomes a moral issue for this country. It's a matter of fundamental morality that as a nation, we're obliged to find an answer to this challenge. The alternative is to continue to collectively turn away and allow our institutions and charity queues for the unemployed and homeless, and one might say candidates for incarceration, to be filled to overflowing by successive generations of the top 12 sites. Improved infrastructure and quality human services have a part to play, a major part to play. But the report makes no case for an enlarged welfare bureaucracy. The cycle of extreme disadvantage needs to be tackled at the community level, employing strategies that cultivate community strengths. What the research literature, the international research literature, summarises in 2 words: collective efficacy. What we recommend in this report is a firm political and administrative commitment to stay the distance with a manageable number of highly disadvantaged communities in order to genuinely increase the life opportunities of those who live in them. The operational principle should be this: in order for services and infrastructure interventions to be effective in the long run, they must not only be useful in their own right, but simultaneously serve the end of strengthening the overall community. The target strengths have in common a focus upon the community as a functional entity whose core goal-determining, problem-solving, and effort-sustaining capacities can be developed. On behalf of those who have worked on this project, I thank the sponsoring bodies for their forbearance, which has been tested, and support they've provided, and we do so in the hope that the project's ultimate purpose of a fair go for disadvantaged communities will be assisted by this dropping off the edge report. Thank you.